Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do.
In this episode, I interview Kristen Sonday, co-founder and CEO of Paladin, whose relentless drive to close the justice gap has helped connect over 55,000 people in need with the pro bono attorneys who can change their lives.
Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm your host, Tom Martin. I'm really lucky today to have on Kristen Sonday. Now, she's the co-founder of Paladin, and she is a force of nature. She is everywhere all at once and speaks to pro bono and the need that people have for help and organizing that in such a way that she really brings something new to the table. And I really am looking forward to you speaking with her because I've been so impressed with her career and what she's accomplished and have us share that with you today. So with that, Kristen, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on. You're in Chicago right now?
I'm in Chicago right now. Yes. Trying to stay warm here.
Yeah, because I asked because we've seen each other at so many different places. I know that you travel around so much, and part of the force of nature is that you just seem to be at all of the different places doing all of the things. And it's just really impressive that, you've been able to sustain that. You have a lot of stamina.
Oh, well, thank you. And likewise, but I just think it's so important to be constantly like on the ground talking to people who are working on these issues on the front lines, understanding what the current environment is like in pro bono and legal aid and access to justice, understanding how firms are tailoring their programs according to what they're seeing on the ground, and really making sure that we can stay as up to date as possible at the company so that we're building the most powerful platform again.
And I undersold it a bit because not only are you at Paladin, but you also have Long Jump. And do you mind sharing a little bit about what that is?
Of course. So Long Jump is a really early stage venture capital fund that I co founded many years ago with a few founder friends in Chicago. And our focus is on investing in overlooked founders and ideas in the Chicagoland area. We write checks of 100-ish K to early stage founders really wanting to be that first check in and help catalyze their fundraising rounds and their businesses to help them scale, especially if they don't have a network like other founders do.
And for those that might not be as familiar with Paladin, um, just share with us a little bit about what Paladin is and what your mission is.
Of course. So Paladin is the leading pro bono management platform. And our mission is to increase access to justice by helping legal teams run more efficient pro bono programs. So essentially, how it works is that we provide a free version of our platform to nonprofits, legal aid organizations. They're inputting pro bono cases into the system. And then with the click of a button, they can send them out in real time to the Paladin platform at big law firms, in house corporate teams, for bar associations. And the idea is to really build infrastructure for the pro bono ecosystem that hasn't previously existed to help pro bono administrators manage their programs more efficiently and effectively, and also help lawyers get more involved more seamlessly than they had been able to before.
Before we started, you'd mentioned about this kind of professionalization of pro bono. And I want to touch on that as kind of like a hint about where we'll be going later on. But if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, one of the trends that we've seen since we started Paladin many years ago is that it's starting to become more integrated in the firm rather than being kind of its own isolated department, which is really exciting to me because I think it better aligns incentives for folks across the board to support pro bono efforts. So, for example, we're seeing more pro bono teams collaborating with professional development folks internally to help find pro bono cases that help junior folks in particular gain valuable in-person hands-on experience. We're seeing more business development teams working with pro bono to help facilitate pro bono opportunities between the firm and their corporate clients to increase that engagement and build relationships. And so I think the more integrated we can make the pro bono process and infrastructure across the firm, the more incentivized everyone will be to get involved and not just increase their community impact, but also increase the business impact for both the firm and the individual attorney. And that's something that I think is relatively new.
What I really like about your work and what I like about Paladin is that it makes it kind of easy in a way to plug in. Whereas before, each of the pro bono, the different pro bono initiatives that firms would have would feel like different silos, like separated, didn't really communicate with each other, and you kind of had to find your way into it. Whereas this, it seems like really plug and play. You have a platform, you get on it, and you can identify the kinds of cases that you would like to take on, and it just makes it really straightforward.
Exactly. And that's really the whole goal is to make it as seamless as possible for lawyers to take on more pro bono work so that we can help as many people in need as possible. And prior to Paladin, the entire ecosystem was run on emails and spreadsheets that were incredibly manual and ad hoc, and there just hadn't really been tech investment in this area. And so for me, it seemed like a really exciting opportunity to leverage technology to increase efficiencies and build out this infrastructure that hadn't previously existed to give people a starting place to build on top of.
100%. So, okay, that was the preview of where we're going to go in the back half. But as everyone knows, I love to get into people's backstories and origin stories. So I'd like to ask you about yours a little bit. You're in Chicago. Um, is that where you grew up? Where did you grow up?
Yes, I am a Jersey girl through and through. So grew up in New Jersey, spent most of my life there, and I am first generation college Latina. Really, fought for everything that I have from the beginning. And my parents didn't go to college. My dad didn't finish high school. Even he got his GED. But what they really instilled in me early on was this sense of like hard work and grit and determination and resiliency to figure things out and build. So my father, he didn't finish high school, but went on to become a junior police officer. Then he worked at a car dealership and then ended up merging those two to build a company that builds and equips emergency police vehicles. And so they work on kind of the lights and sirens and technology that help law enforcement. And that's really where I got to see how a company was built from the ground up. I would spend weekends with him in his office, helping do paperwork that I'm sure he redid many times over. But seeing him work so hard and figure it out as he went without having any safety net was really powerful to me. And then on my mom's side, so she is Puerto Rican, and I got to see, firsthand how um, complicated the immigrant struggle was, or the immigrant type of struggle in assimilating and fitting in. And for me, as a first generation college student, and I was lucky enough to go to Princeton, really merging my worlds of kind of like first gen and this incredible academic opportunity where people came from all different walks of life was really eye opening to me and made me curious in thinking about how I can leverage all these different experiences to build something for those that didn't have access to those systems and conversations and resources. And so that's a little bit about how I became so kind of curious, and I work really hard to make sure that I'm representing as many folks as I can who might not have a voice in a room where decisions are being made, and thinking about how I can incorporate those experiences into the technology that we're building so that they are represented.
It sounds like you and I have a lot in common. Kind of a similar story with my parents and being first to go to college and higher education and stuff. And yeah, it's you learn a lot sometimes not even from what your parents say, but just seeing what they do and
Hmm.
how they get through it. Staying on growing up in New Jersey, like what was your neighborhood like? Was it a suburb? Was it in the city? Like what was that experience like when you were a kid?
So I lived in a suburb of New York. A lot of my friends' parents worked in the city. It was upper middle class, pretty homogenous, and I was very lucky because I had a lot of resources available to me. And a lot of my friends went on to incredible schools, and their parents were really successful and professional. And I got to learn a lot through my friends and their parents, and they really inspired me to work hard and never settle and familiarize myself a little bit more with the different paths that I could take longer term in my career. So I tried to expose myself to as much as possible when I was in high school and just continue asking questions and learning from them because their experience was so different from mine and my parents. And that really opened my eyes to what was out there and available. And I really had there was nothing holding me back at that point. I wanted to just shoot for the moon, and luckily it worked out with Princeton. But I worked really hard to get there.
Do you come from a big family? Do you have a lot of brothers and sisters? What's that like?
No, it was just me and my little sister. And, even though my parents were always working really hard to provide for us, they always put us first. And they were so supportive of anything and everything we wanted to try, whether it was sports or took horseback riding for a while, which terrified my father, or whether it was, art class or STEM. They were just really encouraging of what we wanted to do. And my dad said, he always said, I don't care what you do, I just want you to be the best and I want you to work really hard at it. And that concept of excellence and being really good at what you do is something that has been a through line for me throughout my educational career and now my professional career and also personal. In that whatever I do, I really want to strive to be the best because that is how you change the world.
Yeah, you have to be to change the world, to put a dent in the universe. I,
Hmm.
I'm kind of curious, like is there something that stands out when, like, prior to college that is an activity that you did that you really enjoyed and that you excelled at? Maybe it was horseback riding, maybe it was a sport that you engaged in. What's a memory of that that stays with you?
Soccer was my first love as a kid. So I played soccer all throughout school. My dad was our coach, and then he went on to become the president of our local soccer league. And it was an experience that like brought in my whole family. We all played together. We all went to all the games for my and my little sister's games. We, traveled to different towns and states playing games, and that's how I got exposed to different communities. And then that was also around like the Mia Hamm, Brandy Chastain days and the Women's World Cup, and those were some of my first role models. Were these women who were changing the world through sports and empowerment and excellence, and for me that was a really exciting time. So I track a lot of soccer currently, and also that's transferred over to football as well, American football, because that was an activity that we all watched together as a family growing up too.
Yeah, and speaking of football, we had a pretty awesome halftime show with Bad Bunny. I really enjoyed that. It was a really great moment. Um,
Yeah, it was exciting, and just a moment of hopefully unity for everyone in my mind, and just that last message that nothing is stronger than hate, but love. Um, it's just so powerful, and I think in a moment like this, we need to remember the ties that do bind us rather than divide us.
1000%. Um, yeah, the joy and love expressed in that show was amazing. You know, my daughter was in soccer, my
Mm,
younger daughter Maya, and I definitely remember like all the times taking her to practice, and there's the highs, but there's also the lows. There were a lot of practices where I would take her out, and here in Vancouver, it's just raining and it's cold, but she's
mhm.
getting through the practices and getting through, the games that were like that. And does anything like that stand out to you from your experience? I'm sure there's probably one where, you just had to learn the grit side of it, about sticking with it even when it's not ideal.
Yeah, I think the two things that stand out for me about growing up with soccer are number one, just the teamwork element and knowing that everyone plays a role on the field, right? So I was a forward on the right side. And everyone has their role in their position, and your goal is to do the best that you can in your position while also supporting the rest of your teammates in theirs. And that's something that transfers over to business. I seek to be the best CEO, but also get out of the way when my colleagues who are much better at different skill sets than I, have an opportunity to really shine and grow. And so I want to support them in that. So really making sure that you are working hard in what you do and supporting others is something that has stuck with me. And the other is thinking about the long game, right? It's really easy to get discouraged after the other team scores a goal or there's some kind of like penalty or something. But keeping in mind that you have time and the game is not just one goal. It's 90 minutes, right? And you have an opportunity to come back and think through strategy and A/B test in many ways different plays and see what works and doesn't. Learn from your teammates and your surroundings and your opponents, and you're just making sure that you're constantly iterating and thinking about the long-term play rather than just getting discouraged by some setback that might happen in the short term is really important. And similarly, when you get a big win, you do score a goal, it's important to celebrate those small moments and wins and then turn back to, the longer term game as well.
I think that's a great way to look at it. And speaking of a win, like, so after high school, after your experience with soccer, you go on to Princeton University, and I believe your major was politics. Is that right?
Yes, yes. Majored in politics and got a certificate in Latin American studies to learn more about the roots.
Yeah, and I also saw that you went to Universidad de Salamanca, and that's in Spain. And was that while you were undergrad, or was that after or before?
Yes, that was a study abroad program during my sophomore year. And I had barely been out of New Jersey before I went to college. And so I took advantage of every single opportunity to travel and learn. I served as a research assistant for a politics professor, which is another really meaningful experience for me because I got to learn more about the world of academia. And I'm a huge nerd. So I loved the research and writing and like running like statistical regressions in the basement of the Princeton library. Like those are the moments that really stood out when you come to some really interesting understanding or revelation in the data that people hadn't been talking about before. And it was also one of the first times that I was working closely with a professional woman who served as a role model for me and kind of gave me experience in both within Princeton and also took me around to different conferences, talking about our work. So that was really exciting to see and be a part of. But yeah, I felt very, very lucky by the resources that Princeton offered. They also paid for me to spend a summer in Argentina and Chile writing my senior thesis. It was the first time I'd been to South America. And so, really, any opportunity to learn, I was there.
Wow, that sounds like an amazing experience. Let's unpack it a little bit. Like the research. So that was the research position where you were working with your mentor there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. So I was like a freshman, sophomore year, and I was like literally just building out Excel files of data taken from books. Remember those hard copy books in the library? And
Yeah.
putting, digitizing them essentially into data sets and then running regressions.
Okay.
Um, and for me, it was just really exciting to be a part of that research process and, dig into some studies I hadn't known about before.
So that advisor that you mentioned, what was she like? And was there, I guess, was there a push, or like was there a motivation that you got from her in what you're doing now?
Yes, great question. So she was pretty early on in her career and, fighting for tenure at these universities, as most junior professors do. And she was just really hungry to learn and to develop studies that people hadn't before. And I think that idea of, digging deep and creating something that hadn't previously existed was something that really stuck out to me. Uncovering trends that people hadn't found before or building something that hadn't existed really do carry through to entrepreneurship. And then also just being surrounded by her and her colleagues who are working on these interesting studies and traveling. She actually was the first person who brought me to Chicago for a conference. So I got to travel across the US a bit with her. It was really exciting for me to just see what was out there.
So I'm curious about how your career progressed from, Princeton to Paladin. Like there was definitely an in between. Um, and what were the moves, like what were the steps that brought you to that place? Like what do it's such a big endeavor, and a leap of faith. And so was there anything that in your experience up until that point opened that opportunity for you?
Absolutely. And the path is never linear, right? So I think of every career experience, especially that you have as a someone on the junior side, is really a stepping stone to figuring out where you're meant to be, what you're meant to do. So my very first job out of college was with the US Justice Department doing international criminal work in Mexico and Central America. And it's so funny, a lot of my friends had their parents worked in banking or consulting. They had these big networks, and I had no network. So I literally just applied online to the government website, and somehow it worked. So that was really exciting to be able to land a dream job, without a network. So it is possible. And essentially, we were working with, I was specializing in Mexico and Central America, working between our office in DC and our embassy in Mexico City. And we were working with Mexican authorities to extradite fugitives. So essentially, if you had committed a crime in the US, you fled to Mexico, Central America, we would work with the relevant authorities to extradite that person back to stand trial. And that to me was just the most interesting and exciting work. It's really where I got exposed to how complicated our judicial system is to navigate. And I always say, even if you're American, you speak English, you're well educated, it's hard enough. And if you're not American or you don't speak English or you're not educated, it just felt nearly impossible. And so having that advocate with you to navigate the system really, in our case, could mean the difference between winning and losing a case, or in some cases like asylum, life or death. And the stats show you are, I think it's 11x more likely to win an immigration case if you have a lawyer with you than not. I mean, the statistics are just crazy about how meaningful it is to have representation. And so seeing that disparity was really inspiring to me in wanting to figure out how I could build something that helped underserved communities in particular, because I was one of the few Latinas on the team, one of the few people who spoke Spanish, to help navigate that process more efficiently. And that's how the kernel of Paladin got started.
I know that you had some experience at a company called Grouper. Tell me a little bit about that and how that might have, you know, set you on your path.
Yes, yes. Oh my goodness, that's a throwback. So, okay, so after DOJ, so I was there for about 2.5 years. I joined the founding team of a tech startup in New York called Grouper. And it was essentially a social club for pairing up groups of friends. And what I really liked about it was that I learned how to build a startup and a company from the ground up. So I was the second employee. There were only four of us for the first couple of years. And we took the company through Y Combinator, which is the largest and most prestigious accelerator program based in Silicon Valley. And that's where we learned how to build a startup, how to raise money, how to grow and expand. I did all their operations, growth. I mean, you're wearing 20 hats each at a company of four people. And getting that on the ground experience was absolutely essential for me to be able to go on and build Paladin. And so I sometimes joke that everything I learned about startups, I learned at Grouper. And those learnings, good and bad, have enabled me to become a much more effective founder and CEO over at Paladin now.
And I think it's really important for the audience to hear that, like it's not always the first try that is perfect. And I think a lot of times, like when we see narratives out there about startups, it seems like it gets launched and it's like this hockey puck of, success. And there's lessons learned about how things work, about learning how to, actually operate a startup, build a community around it. There's a lot of moving parts. And so, like you said, like the path to success sometimes is a windy road. But that next step about founding Paladin, like how did that come together?
Yeah, well, and I just want to touch on one thing because I do think it's really important. Your point about like taking time to learn before you jump into your own venture about like what you like, don't like, where your strengths lie, where your weaknesses are is so critical because it just allows you to like cut through a lot of the like negative parts of building and really focus on where you excel in that zone of genius. So I do think, getting that training experience on the ground and learning from other people and really paying attention to where you best excel is super important. Interestingly, I did not have the idea for Paladin. I'm much more of an executor, coming off of that first startup experience and learning how to just do everything myself and make it work. I met my co-founder Felicity in 2015 through a mutual friend, and she was a litigator at a big law firm in New York at the time. And she had just come off of winning asylum for a Colombian man and his family who were being persecuted by a local guerrilla group. So the first night we met, it was actually at a music festival on the Jersey Shore. It all comes back to Jersey.
Yeah.
And we were like sitting in this tent, just like talking to each other, getting to know each other. And she was telling me about this experience, and she had previously interned at the UN and the International Criminal Court. And that felt so synergistic with my work at DOJ. And I was telling her about my experience as well. And she said, you know what, Kristen, like all my friends want to do pro bono, but it's so hard to find a case that's going to be a good fit. And it's super manual. At this point, you have dozens of legal services organizations that work with their firms sending through these manual case lists, and you're copying and pasting and curating and you're sending them out and there's a spreadsheet, and she said it's super inefficient. And I thought, based on my experience with DOJ and interest in serving underserved populations, and my experience at Grouper in building a technology company that brought people together and essentially served as a matchmaker, there might be a place for technology to support this work and really achieve my personal mission. And so I was just so excited about the opportunity. She actually had another co founder at the time, but the next day I sent her a 12-slide PowerPoint presentation about how I should be your co founder. And thankfully, she agreed, and it worked out well for all of us. But that's really how we got started, and we both quit our jobs a few months later and went all in on it because we cared so deeply about the mission and the work to be done.
That's a great story about how, happenstance and how things come together and just being open-minded and also open to the opportunity of the moment, especially one that has such a deep impact like pro bono. Interesting too, though, that your experience like with Grouper is about matchmaking, and in essence, like, Paladin is about matchmaking. It's about matching attorneys with the right pro bono opportunity. So that's kind
Yeah,
of cool.
exactly. And sometimes I worry that folks coming out of college get so fixated on making sure they find the right job straight away, and they know what they want to do and they want to go do it. But honestly, like Paladin wouldn't be as successful as it is if I hadn't had that nonlinear path of access to justice and technology, because now Paladin is this great intersection of both of them and figuring out how I can leverage one to support the other. And just having those different experiences, I think, can really empower you longer term in figuring out how do you make those experiences collective and compounding to increase your impact.
Let's come back a little bit to the discussion we started at the beginning about the professionalization of pro bono. Is that just like a recent phenomenon within the past year or two, or has this been happening for the past 5 to 10 years? And what does it look like now? Like, how easy is it or difficult for law firms to incorporate pro bono, you know, within their system using Paladin?
It's a great question. So traditionally, firms have either had a full-time pro bono person or team, or someone who's managing their pro bono program part-time. And they've typically been on an island managing the program, on their own. And I'd say it's been in the last few years that we've really seen greater collaboration between the pro bono teams and some of these other business units within the firm in figuring out how they can add value all around.
That would also change like the mindset of attorneys working at the firm about contributing more because it's easier, right? Like, have you found that to be the case?
Absolutely. So traditionally, pro bono was seen as kind of a nice to have. You know, obviously, we want to boost community impact. Um, But one thing that we've also seen in connection with the professionalization is firms starting to make it more of a routine in a way that better aligns incentives. So, for example, they're offering billable credit for pro bono work. They are having pro bono trainings count towards their CLE requirements. They're incorporating pro bono engagement in performance reviews. They're incorporating Paladin, well, hopefully Paladin, and other technologies into some of their like innovation programming and learning paths for junior folks as they seek to build their skills. And so I think the more integrated that pro bono can become and the technology that serves them, the more holistic of an experience it's going to be for attorneys and get more folks engaged. For Paladin's technology, because we really focus on that infrastructure and creating the first real time database of thousands of pro bono opportunities across the country, we've seen a decrease in administrative work. We've seen a boost in engagement. The first couple of years we were running Paladin, we did studies that showed that we were able to boost engagement by over 30% in the first year. And now, with a lot of our data and reporting tools, which are relatively new, we're starting to surface really unique business insights that help tailor the programs a little bit more, manage risk, increase compliance, and staff and restaff cases in a way that's going to benefit everyone at the firm. So previously, they had insights into how many hours folks had done, but not a good sense of the ROI of those hours from a business perspective and an impact perspective. And we're able to surface all of that for them in a way that empowers pro bono teams to be more integrated.
I'm curious about how you do that. Like, I would imagine that, and correct me if I'm wrong in that it doesn't do this, but I would think that when an attorney is working on a pro bono case, there might be certain skill sets that they employ or that they have to learn to employ to actually
Mhm.
do that work. And if, Paladin was able to essentially track that or to show additional skills or deepen skills that are achieved from the work and report that back to the firm, that would be, a way that the firm can see that the engagement with pro bono is actually benefiting them. Is it something like that?
That's exactly right, Tom. So it's interesting because like the inherent professional development benefits of pro bono have always been there. They just haven't been as quantifiable and frankly qualifiable. So we help with that in two main ways. The first is that now we're tagging every pro bono opportunity with the skills that attorneys will build through that casework. And we're allowing attorneys to be able to search for pro bono based on those skills. So, for example, if someone wants experience in court, they can search by that skill and gain materially important expertise that way. Like Felicity, for example, her first time in a courtroom was not going to be on the $1 billion energy company case. It was going to be on an asylum case. And that was really invaluable experience for her. So we want to make sure that attorneys can find opportunities that match the skills that they're looking to build and experiences that they want to be gaining. Then on the administrator side, because we're capturing that information, we can more easily surface trends and patterns related to attorney development, both individually and holistically in a way that they haven't been able to do before. And that just helps with professional development, of course, risk management, compliance, and really making sure that attorneys are leveling up in a way that we can manage and measure.
What are some other changes that are happening in the pro bono world right now?
Besides the alignment with professional development and business development, something else that we're seeing that's really exciting to me is that law schools are starting to build out more systematic programming around pro bono and making it a part of the student's experience much earlier on. We were really excited to launch our first version of Paladin for law schools this fall, and we launched with over 22,000 students across 30 schools around the country. And we're completely blown away by the pro bono opportunities that these students were taking on. Just in the first semester alone, they picked up over 5,600 pro bono opportunities, ranging from research projects to client intake, to helping with translation and interpretation. And they're helping on a really wide range of civil and criminal needs that are going to allow them to get more hands on experiential training than law school typically teaches and build those skills from an earlier start in their career. All the while ingraining pro bono and this culture of community and service from the law school days, which I think is just incredibly important. So that was an exciting development for us to see as well.
Yeah, I think that's awesome because, like as you said, it kind of like plants the seed early on that, this is something that's part of being a lawyer, which it is. Like it's part of the oath that I took as a lawyer that you
Right.
want to give back, you want to pay it forward. And also the fact that, like, not only is it inculcated in them early on that pro bono is important, but there's a lot of law schools that don't have clinical programs, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that
Yep.
don't have access to that kind of experience for their students. And again, just like, you made adding pro bono or organizing and clarifying pro bono programs at law firms easier so that you could just essentially plug into it. You're doing that for law firms and, in essence, providing like a plug-in clinical program.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And, traditionally schools had mostly operated pro bono and public interest programs through those clinics. But now we're able to open up the aperture so students can take on opportunities from across the country. And of course, because they don't have to be licensed, they can do so much more than, what's just available within their school. So we, at any given point, we have about 500 projects on the platform that are eligible for students to take on, and they're building relationships, networks, and skills that they didn't have access to previously. So I think we're only going to see that continue to grow over time, and I'm incredibly excited about that.
Okay, so let me ask you the question that I got to ask because, we got to talk about it is just what's the impact of AI? Like, how's that affecting Paladin and pro bono programs?
Yeah, oh my goodness. I think AI could be the single most powerful development in our generation to help close the justice gap. So currently, about 92% of low income individuals' civil legal needs are either not met or inadequately met, occurring in Legal Services Corporation. And that's just a huge gap. These legal aid organizations have to turn away about 50% of people, even who qualify for pro bono, because of a lack of capacity. So we have a lack of capacity and a lack of infrastructure, and I believe, can help with both. Some of the biggest opportunities that I see are really around intake and triage. That seems to be a very common challenge across the board with legal services organizations. We work with about 350 legal aids around the country, and everyone talks about intake and how the current system is a bottleneck to vetting and triaging people's needs. So, for example, you can have a legal aid organization attorney doing an intake call with a client, and a lot of them do phone verifications to make sure that the client is eligible. They'll spend 30 minutes on the phone with someone only to realize by the end of the call that their issue was not even a legal one. It was a tax issue or,
Yeah.
some other issue that they can't help with. And those 30 minutes are really valuable and could have been spent helping a number of other clients who qualify. So I think intaking, helping issue spot, triaging folks, vetting eligibility, those are all pretty low hanging fruit ways that AI can be applied. And then making sure, as you all have done with Legal Aid of North Carolina and Leah, making sure that folks are getting to the right resources for them, whether that is the legal aid organization, whether it's a pro bono attorney, or whether it's other legal information online that they can use to further their case. Those are all opportunities I see as being really powerful and helping serve significantly more people.
Well, of course, I totally agree. I think that for once, that this gap that we've been talking about in access to justice, like there's finally an opportunity to bridge that gap. And so I'm really looking forward to that.
And there are so many constituencies that we can serve through AI. It could be the legal aid organizations themselves, with respect to that intake and triage. It can be legal aid attorneys using AI technology to manage their casework more effectively and efficiently. It can be training pro bono lawyers to be able to manage magnitudes more pro bono clients so we can serve more people. And it can be the pro se litigant, his or himself, really helping navigate their own cases if for some reason we can't take them on through an attorney. So really myriad of ways that we can leverage these tools. Obviously, it has to be done responsibly and with humans in the loop to make sure that we're providing the right information so we don't cause harm. But we're starting to see a lot more firms collaborating with legal aid orgs, legal tech companies collaborating. And the more collaboration that we can have across these organizations, I think the more powerful the tools will be.
Well, with the time we have left, let me ask you a couple of questions that I ask all my guests. The first one has to do with, you have a lot going on. Like you travel a lot. There's multiple different organizations that, you're working on. You're the CEO of Paladin and then also with Long Jump and a contributor to Thomson Reuters. Um, how do you keep it all balanced? Like, is there such a thing as work-life balance?
I do not think there is such a thing as work life balance. It all kind of melds together. But it goes back to one of our earlier points around figuring out your strengths and weaknesses. Something that I have learned to do over the past few years in particular is delegate the work that I'm not as strong at and that I don't enjoy as much. So that way I can focus on areas of excellence where I can provide the greatest value. And so figuring out those buckets has been really essential to me. Someone shared with me an analogy recently that said, you're juggling a million balls and you have to figure out which ones are glass and which are plastic because some are bound to drop.
I love
And
that.
I love that too. And it's such a great way to think through, what are the things that are mission critical in my life? What are the things that, it's okay if we don't do them as well or thoroughly, but figuring out how you prioritize is super important.
Well, I'll tell you what, that leads me to the last question, which is it's tied into that because at the end of the day, after doing all of these things, like what makes it worthwhile for you?
For me, it goes back to the pro bono client and thinking about all the victims and survivors at the Justice Department that we served while I was there. To date, Paladin has helped make over 55,000 pro bono connections. And these are low income immigrants, veterans, elderly folks, kids with special needs, tenants, people needing benefits. I think about all these individual cases and the people that we're helping. And there's nothing better than waking up in the morning and looking at our Slack channel to see, what types of cases people have taken on, over the last day and see how many lives that we're changing. And yeah, nothing's better than that.
Well, that's a great note to end on. I mean, the human impact, the positive, outcomes and just the numbers that you just mentioned are just an enormous evidence of the great, dent in the universe that you're making. And so appreciate you being on the show, Kristen.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for the opportunity to share our story.
Yeah, it's a great one, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it unfolds. For people that are listening in and want to learn more about you and Paladin, how can they do that?
Of course. So you can reach me anytime, Kristen, Kristen, at joinpaladin, PALADIN.com. And our URL is joinpaladin.com. So definitely encourage you to check it out. Check us out on LinkedIn and leave us a message. But we're always looking for ways to increase our impact and expand our network. So happy to chat. And again, just really appreciate the opportunity. So thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks again, Kristen. And also for all of you out there that are listening or watching, if you're working at a firm that does not yet have Paladin, you really need to get with the program and look into it. Go to joinpaladin.com and check out what opportunities are available to you. Um, Thank you.
Thank you.
And for everyone out there, see you next time.
Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.